Since today is the release of the new Star Wars show Andor, I decided I'd take a look back at the Star Wars film I've seen about as much as Solo, meaning twice, Rogue One. Released back in 2016 and directed by Gareth Edwards, this film stars Felicity Jones, Diego Luna, Ben Mendelsohn, Mads Mikkelsen, and many others, and tells the story of how the Rebel Alliance got the plans for the Death Star that reveals its ultimate weakness. I remember when this was announced, and I thought this was a really weird story to choose for their first spin-off film in this universe. I know I'm not the first to say it, but making an entire movie around how they got this one thing seems a bit odd, but to my and a lot of other people's surprise, this was actually a really good film. But it's not without its faults. I'll start with the positives. In terms of characters, there are some that are done really well, and some that it seems like the writers went, "Oh, right, you're here. Guess I'll add in something for you to say or do." I'll go into that more in a bit, but for characters like Jyn and Cassian, they're surprisingly complex and interesting characters that you don't really see in Star Wars, both past and present. Both have different ideologies about the rebellion and what they're willing to fight for, and to see their arcs through this movie was honestly one of the best parts that I don't think enough people talk about. Also, Alan Tudyk as K2SO, basically the more badass C-3PO, is an amazing scene stealer. On a technical side, this is probably tied with The Last Jedi as the best looking Star Wars film. Greg Fraser's cinematography here is absolutely gorgeous and really added a feel to Star Wars that we hadn't seen yet, and that was the feeling of war. Yeah, for a series called Star Wars, none of them have ever really felt like war films, both from a visual perspective and a narrative perspective. But here, not only does the narrative feel like a war story, but Fraser's cinematography actually adds the claustrophobia and darkness that comes with a lot of war films. Truly, it's a marvel to witness. I won't go into spoilers, but the second half is truly where this film shines. While I can't say I feel for a lot of characters when they die, everything from the action, the intensity of the battle, to the incredibly satisfying ending makes this worth a watch all of its own. So, while I love some characters like Jyn and Cassian, most of the secondary characters and villain I really didn't feel much for, and that's due to a lack of writing for them. This is the first time since the prequels where we get a majority of a new cast to be introduced to, and there's quite a lot of new characters that get introduced. The problem is, because of the way this narrative is structured and who it's structured around, we don't get enough time to learn or care about a lot of the characters. Rather than dedicate time to get us to know and understand these characters better, the film instead opts for exposition and calls it a day there. This is not how you write good and interesting characters. You need to take the time and give us something to be able to latch onto them, whether it be easy and understandable personalities to attach to, or showing, not telling, things about them like their backstory or something of their past. Films like Guardians of the Galaxy and The Suicide Squad are great examples at introducing audiences to a boatload of new characters and getting us to care about them. The reason they work is because they take their time in establishing them and often tie the characters' arcs or backstories to what's happening in the narrative, so we're able to get a better understanding of them. Here, it's just exposition, and that's pretty much of what most of the first half is. We're flown to new planets, shown new characters that give us an exposition dump of their trading card stats, and maybe a brief backstory, and we continue the cycle until the second half starts. This is the biggest flaw of the film. With a plot as simple as this, the first half is surprisingly complicated because of how it feeds us information about the world and characters. Again, exposition is fine in doses, but it should not be your main source of feeding the audience information. There's so much about Jyn and her relationship with Saw Gerrera that we don't see, but they tell us about, and it doesn't result in us caring about or understanding their relationship anymore. The film tries to get us to care about the secondary characters, but it ultimately didn't by the end. I'd say there was a compelling villain, but again, there wasn't much given to him, so there wasn't any kind of threatening presence about him. For a series that's given us such great villains, Krennic is just a bland and forgettable general, and that's a shame. But despite those negatives, the second half truly does save this film. While the first half is rough and there's not a lot given to most of the characters, Rogue One is still a surprisingly compelling film about what it means to rise up and fight for what's right, even if you're just a regular person. Incredible action, beautiful visuals, and some surprising depth, Rogue One is a pretty good Star Wars film in my book. I'm going to give Rogue One a 7 out of 10.